Hey there. I'm so glad you're here at the Perseverance Podcast. My name is Kelvin. I am known as the Deaf Blind Potter. So today, I got a special guest for you, and you're going to be super excited for this. Before we dive into the actual Perseverance Podcast, let me give you a couple announcements that are coming up. So first, if you need pieces, you need to get them sooner than later, because I'm going to be stopping doing a lot of pottery for a little while because I got a massive order that just came in of 300 mugs, which is going to be taking up a lot of my time. So if you're wanting pieces, I would get them soon because I'm going to probably be sold out for the next 3 months or so. The other thing that I'm super excited to talk to you guys about is the San Diego tour. What is this? The San Diego tour is where I take my potter's wheel and I do a live in-person or virtual live presentation to your congregation, to your business, to your staff meeting, to your school, to encourage them to find joy in their pain, to persevere and build a character that has hope. Just like the Perseverance Podcast is all about, is we're persevering through the challenges of our lives. So I'm excited for the San Diego tour. My goal by the end of 2022, do 4 virtual presentations and 4 in-person presentations using the potter's wheel. Go ahead and sign up. Either you can email me at info@perseverancepodcast.com, or you can email me at speaking@deafblindpotter.com, so that way I know you're coming directly for scheduling me for an event. Again, I'm super excited for the San Diego tour, where I can actually go meet you guys in person or meet you virtually and inspire you or your colleagues or even your congregation. You guys ready to go on this journey? So let's dive into the Perseverance Podcast. Hey everybody, it's so good to see you, even though I can't see you. It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood, and I'm so excited. I have to tell you one thing. This story that we're going to hear, and I'm going to mold, and if you're on the podcast, remember you got to check out the YouTube and see how this story gets molded and shaped. But one thing about this story, it truly is the prodigal son, or aka the prodigal daughter, and how even though she went off the beaten path, she then came back to Christ. And I can't wait for you to see what she's doing and how she went into the darkness, came into the light, and now is providing so much light into this world that we can never imagine. You guys ready to meet my friend here? All right, here we go. Persevering is what can allow you to overcome. But you have to find joy in the pain that you live with. It's not going to be easy. But the reward and the character that you will build in persevering through your challenges will be so rewarding. It will give you so much hope. Are you ready to persevere through your challenges? Let's do this. I want to introduce you to my friend Whitney. Whitney, welcome to the Perseverance Podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
So, I want to dive into let's just say when you were 5 years old.
Yeah.
What was life like for you?
Beautiful, wonderful. I was really blessed to be given to a high school sweetheart couple who had been together since they were 15 years old. They had the quote unquote storybook fairy tale. They went to high school together. They went to college, got married, and I was their beautiful bundle of joy. And they were the first out of their group of friends to have kids. So I was always the center of attention with a bunch of adults. Was used to getting up on stage with my dad. He's a drummer, and I would go sit with the band and be on stage. And my mom comes from a theater background, so put me in dance classes and theater classes. And so it was a beautiful life as a 5-year-old. My mom was a believer and my dad was not. Now, my father knew of the Lord, but he would tell you today that he thought that he was going to ride into heaven on my mother's coattails. And she told him often, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. So she was always a really solid marker, direction pointer to Christ as a child for me. And when I was 7 years old, I was at my uncle's church. My uncle was a pastor, and they had an altar call. And I realized in my 7-year-old brain, I've never done this before. I've never actually walked down an aisle and accepted Christ. And so I did. And I remembered the elders of the church surrounding those of us who had walked down the aisle, and they laid hands on us. And this was a spirit-filled church, so they started speaking in tongues over us. And I'd never, ever heard that before. I was raised in a Presbyterian church. So I hear these people saying this stuff I've never heard. And I remember that night going to bed, and my uncle and aunt came in the room and they said, "Do you realize what you did today? Do you realize the magnitude of what you did?" And I was like, I absolutely do. I want Jesus to live in my heart. I want to be with him forever. And so from the time I was 7 years old, I knew I was saved. I knew that I was going to heaven. I had a beautiful gift from the Lord that at nighttime, when I would get in my bed and start to pray, I would imagine myself in the Father's arms. But yeah, that was my childhood. It was great. My dad ended up getting saved when I was 9. So I was raised by 2 amazing, Jesus-loving parents. They're not perfect people, and they would tell you they're not perfect people, but they are a gift to me. They're great parents.
That's awesome. So you were the center of attention, and you loved it.
Oh, yeah.
And that was something that you craved into teenage years. Yeah. So let's just jump right there, knowing that you were loving that attention.
I still love it. It's how God wired me. So the center of attention thing, the performance being on stage thing, it's always been a part of me. Unfortunately, as a teenager, that was my love tank. That was the way that I was receiving affirmation and receiving the acknowledgement that I was worthy or important or valuable. Was how much are people paying attention to me? Is what I'm doing enough? And that made me want to roll with the popular crowd of my school. And I did. I'm a very A-type driven person. So if I want something, I go after it hard. And so I wanted to be a cheerleader. I got on that cheerleading squad. I wanted to have the star role of all of the plays in our local community theater. I got those roles. I know that those are also gifts from the Lord. The Lord was blessing me in that time, but my drive was that admiration and achievement and recognition. As I was rolling with the popular crowd, I started to go and party with them. I was drinking, but I was saved at 7 years old. I grew up in a Christian home. I knew better than that. I knew better, and I purposefully separated from my youth group, from Young Life, which I was a part of, and chose to go in this other direction. It was just more important to me. As I stepped away from that youth group and I stepped away from Young Life, the adult leaders that were in charge of those organizations, they didn't pursue me anymore. They didn't come after me and say, "Hey, come back." So to me, it was a validation that I wasn't really that important to them anyways, which is a lie, but that's what I thought. And this other group of people were giving me attention and it made me feel special and made me feel wanted. And so that's what I did. And then, of course, naturally, those relationships are built on crumbling sand. They're not valuable at all. And so as I'm leaving high school and going to college, all those people who I thought were my best friends turn their backs on me. I'm acquaintances with some of them now, but my best friends from high school, we don't spend any time together anymore.
You're starting to get rejected. You're starting to lose your friends.
Yeah.
You're leaving high school. And now you're going to...
Now I'm going to college.
Clemson.
So I'm going to Clemson. And I'm like, all these people who've turned their back on me now, I'm going to Clemson and I'm going to start fresh. And I'm going to rule this campus. I'm going to have the best college experience ever. I literally in my head had this vision of like a movie, thinking college was going to be just like I saw on the movies. And in the South, rush is a huge thing, joining a Greek organization. And so at Clemson, you rush the very first week you're at school. And there were 12 sororities at our school, but in my hometown, you only joined one of 3. Okay. It was like, these were the top tier, top sororities. So in my head, I'm thinking, I have to get one of those sororities. I have to. Like, how am I not going to? So I go through the rush process, and every single day I get cut by more and more of these top 3 sororities until I finally get to the end of the week where there's only 2 groups. One of them was one of the top 3, and the other one was Zeta Tau Alpha, ZTA. And I go to these parties. One of the girls who's rushing me is from my high school in the top 3 sorority. She's a year older than me, and she's like, listen, you're getting a bid from us tomorrow. You don't have to worry. We got you. And I'm like, okay. So I go to the Zeta pref round, and they are like loving me and so welcoming. And I'm like in my head going, I mean, I'm not going to join your sorority, so thanks for having me, but I've already picked this other one. The next day I get the invitation, and it's a Zeta invitation, not the other sorority that promised me a bid. And I'm like, the only way that could have happened is if people voted against me. And they did. I found that out later. I had been talked about in their voting round, and they voted against me, and I got an invitation to join Zeta instead. So then there's this other, like, very first week of school, and I'm just rejected one more time. And it's people from high school. It was so painful. And at 18, your brain isn't even completely developed yet. So you don't have the emotional knowledge to be able to figure this out logically. I was on my own for the first time, and there was just so much going on, and I was just so broken. So what do? Obviously, join Zeta, because I can't not be a part of one of these groups. Okay, well, I'll just rush headlong into finding a boyfriend. So I start dating this guy, not a believer, in a fraternity. We're partying, like college kids party. I have my Bible on my bedside table for years, just don't pick it up. And I know in my heart that I'm not doing the right thing. I know that this is empty. I remember one morning, it was before a football game, and I woke up, and one of my friends put a shot of vodka in front of me. It's like 8 a.m. and she hands me this shot, and she's like, take the shot. And I'm like, it's 8 o'clock in the morning. And she's like, yeah, but it's game day. Let's go. I remember thinking back to being at home and the safety of being at home and the comfort of that. And then here I am in this college town. I'm being handed a shot of vodka at 8 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, this is insane. This is not right. This is not who I am. I don't like this. But I didn't know where else to turn. I didn't know where to find another group of friends. I didn't know how to remove myself from the sorority. So, you know me, Mrs. A-type achiever, I'm like, I'm going to be the vice president of the sorority. That's going to make me feel good. I'm going to get this full ride to Clemson. I get the full ride to Clemson. I get these internships over the summer. I'm in these relationships with these guys. I look like I have it all. But inside, I'm miserable. miserable.
And I think this is something that I really want to speak to you, my audience. I know some of you are going through this right now. We hear Whitney's story. We hear partying and everything. Because I know. Some of you have messaged me. Some of you have told me, like, it's so dark right now. I'm in so much pain. I'm so empty inside. And I think this is something to remember. Go to the light. Whitney was so empty. She decided to take her own path. And how many of us take that own path, thinking that we can do everything on our own? So Whitney, how did you get to the light?
I was coming back to school for my junior year, so it's fall of my junior year. I'm 20 years old, and I was in a relationship with a Catholic guy who was not a believer. He was a Catholic by family, and Catholics will understand that. If you're a Catholic, your family's Catholic, it's a thing. And my misery level is rising. Now, on the outside, I look like everything is perfect, but it didn't feel good. And I say to the guy, hey, I think we need to go back to church. We need to start going to church. And he goes, well, let's go to the Catholic church. And I said, no, we can't go to the Catholic church. We've got to go to a Bible teaching church. I don't know anything about Catholicism. And he's like, well, I'm not coming with you. Okay. So I realize that our relationship is on shaky ground. I'm 20. I want to get married one day. I'm hoping that I find my husband in college. Like, I don't want to have to go through my 20s single. I grew up in a home where my mom and dad had a healthy marriage. I knew that if I stayed with him, that the foundation of our relationship was not going to be based on Christ, because we couldn't even come to an agreement with where we were going to go to church. Mm-hmm. So I knew that that relationship had to end. Even though I was in my rebellion, even though I was in my sin, I knew I had to walk away. So we broke up, and it was dramatic. I mean, throwing clothes out the front door, and no lie, it was dramatic. I decided to go home for the weekend to see my mom and dad because I didn't have anywhere else to go where I felt like I was going to be safe. So my hometown is a 4-hour drive away from Clemson. So I drive home 4 hours and I go home to see my mom and dad. And I was weeping and begging them, please, please let me come home. Please let me transfer home. Let me go to the school that's in my hometown. Let me come home. This is my safety net. My church is here. My old friends from youth group from long ago are here. I know I can find a community here. And my mom and dad, you are not coming home. You have been given a full scholarship to Clemson. You are in these organizations. You're in leadership. Your world there is thriving, but you are the one who's empty. You are the one who is choosing this and letting yourself live empty. And my mom, before I got in the car to drive back to Clemson for the school week, she grabbed me and she said, Whitney, I will always point you back to the Lord. You will not be happy anywhere until you get your life right with the Lord and turn back to him, and you know it. And I'm like, crying, snot, and tears, and all this stuff. And so I get in the car, and I've got this 4-hour car ride back. And I start screaming at God. I mean, screaming. I've never spoken to the Lord this way. I'm like screaming at him and crying. And I'm like, how could you let my life get to this point? How could you let me go through all that pain I went through in high school and all this pain that I've gone through at Clemson? And here I am again. I'm 20 years old and I'm miserable. How could you let me do this? How could you get me to this point? I'm telling the Lord, how could you get me to this point when it was me the whole time? And the Lord is so long suffering and so patient, and he's just letting me vent and vent and vent. And I remember driving back. I got 30 minutes away from school, and there was just this peace in the car. I finally was done ranting, and I knew that I was done with doing things my way. I knew that there was no other option but to turn back to the Lord and come home. I went back to my apartment and laid down on my bed and looked over at my bedside table, and there was that Bible that was sitting there. Literally had dust on top of it. No lie. Dust on top of it. I open it up and I start reading. And of course, it's the living word of God. So it's like pouring into my spirit. And I remember just saying out loud, Jesus, if you will take me back, I'm ready. And I fell asleep. And I woke up the next morning, and it was literally like these scales had been taken off of my eyes. I saw everything. It was almost like I saw things in Technicolor for the first time, like just this crystal clear vision of where I was and what I'd been gifted. And I had hope again. All of a sudden, there was hope that had infused into my spirit again. And there was a football game that day. I didn't go to the game. I decided to drive to a nearby town by myself and just go spend some time walking around and doing a little shopping and just kind of processing what had just happened. And as I spent that day, I was getting ready to MC the Clemson homecoming pageant. And so I'm getting ready to do this first stage event in my new adult salvation moment. The moment that I actually, as an adult, chose to follow Jesus for the rest of my days. It wasn't until that day when I was 20 that my faith became my faith. He became my rock. He was the rock where I was going to build my house and where I was going to stand. And so I knew that I had to make some really hard choices as a new adult follower of Christ to put boundaries around my life to be able to ensure that my fledgling faith with him would be safe. So that meant that I needed to stop going to parties, which meant that I had to stop hanging out with the friends I was hanging out with. And I needed to get back into church because I needed a community of believers to surround me. And I needed to start having a quiet time every day, which meant reading the Bible and journaling. And I did all those things. And the Lord blessed me. He met me in those places. My friends did not understand it. They were angry. They were hurt. It was painful. I'm not friends with a lot of those people anymore. Some of them I am, but a lot of them I'm not. I didn't know where to go to church because I was in Clemson. And so I started coming home on the weekends because I knew I could go to my home church.
There's a couple of things I want to take away from this. The one thing that I'm realizing, God never forgets his children. And then you experience that peace. I remember that day. It was the 12th time I walked into the mountains, ready to take my life away. And I was screaming at God, I am done with you. Because you took in my eyes and you took in my ears. It's your fault that you made me this way. But like you got that peace in that moment in the car, right into the campus. I heard that voice and got that peace too. And he said, Kelvin, I love you. And I have a plan for you. If you're struggling and wondering, God, how can you use me? Somebody with a disability or just, I've done all these bad things.
I want to tell your listeners as well that when Calvin says that he heard that voice, God is a supernatural God. And I don't think the church at large has done a good job of educating people about the fact that we are really spiritual beings in natural bodies more than we are natural bodies with a spirit being. So sometimes when the Lord speaks to you, you think, oh, was that my imagination? Or was that actually the Lord's voice? So don't discount those moments. Always pray and say, Lord, I want to cover this moment with you, and I want to rebuke and reject any demonic activity, and only your voice can speak to me. And know for sure, once you've said that, that is clear. You can trust your Father. You have the ability to hear the voice of God. Open yourself to that if you've never experienced it before. It's very powerful.
Let's hear how God then started taking you into the light.
Absolutely. My dad, the drummer, has made friends with a local radio station founder who's 4 years older than me, whose name was Chris Meade. And my dad has invited Chris to come to our church to play bass guitar in our church worship band. And I come home and I see this guy with this bass guitar and these Chuck Taylor shoes with this shaggy brown hair and glasses. And I'm like, he is so fine. But I'm thinking to myself, okay, this dude is a believer. He founded a Christian radio station. He went to a Christian college. There is no way that he would ever give the Clemson sorority girl a second chance. He just would not even give me a second glance. So we start hanging out when I come home on the weekends. We first start going out to lunch with my mom and dad after church. Then he starts inviting me over to the radio station so that I can check out the radio station. And in the meantime, my mom is telling him, Whitney's a communications major. She would love to volunteer at the station. She's telling me, Chris owns a radio station and he really wants you to volunteer. Both of those were lies. She was matchmaking the whole time. And it worked. Of course, I knew from the moment I saw him that that was the guy I was going to marry. Chris, it took him a little bit longer. He didn't want to mess up his friendship with my dad. And he was really concerned that if we started dating and then we broke up, that it would just blow up his friendship with my parents. And my parents were at that time supporting him in his ministry with the radio station as just an older couple. And so he didn't want to lose that friendship. And so I did what I do and invited him to come to a sorority formal with me. This Christian college guy coming to a sorority formal at Clemson for the first time, he's like, what have I walked into? We were the only sober people in the room. He's like, what is this? I never experienced this before. But it was a great night, and that was in March. My 21st birthday was that month, and I came home for spring break for the week, and he just said, can we go on a real date? This whole time we've just been kind of talking. After that, we were together 24/7, and we got engaged in November. And then we were married 2 weeks after I graduated from Clemson in May the next year. I was 22 years old when we got married. The Lord blessed my socks off because the moment I turned back to him, he had this amazing gift in Chris just waiting for me. I can't guarantee that that's what he's got for every single person who comes home, every prodigal child who comes home. But in my situation, that's what he had for me. The deepest desires of my heart was to be married young. And so he gifted me with that. And it was really wonderful and sweet.
What was so powerful is when you read The Prodigal Son and really see how God will never forget you. Because he can come and chase you when he sees you coming down. Just like Whitney, she was running home and he was there. What did God start doing in your marriage? You end up having 2 kids. So tell us all about that.
I tell people all the time, salvation is only the beginning of the journey. It's never the end destination. It's a lifelong marathon with the Lord. I married a very Christ-fearing, God-honoring man. And so he has led us in our 14 years of marriage. We celebrate 14 years this year. The Lord has always been the foundation of our marriage. So if you remember, 2008 was the big financial crisis. And so I graduated and I couldn't find a job. I wanted to be a news anchor. That's what I went to school for. I could not find a job. And so with Chris doing the radio station and me getting a job at this news station where I would have to show up at 3:00 every morning would be a very heavy life for us. I wanted a normal life. I wanted an 8 to 5 kind of job. So I got into IT. That was the first thing I did. And then ended up transitioning into a marketing position where I did healthcare marketing for a large hospital system. And I loved working for the hospital. It was a huge hospital, so there was a lot of hustle and bustle and vibrancy, and it's a very team-oriented hospital, so you just feel like a part of a larger family. In the meantime, we're growing the radio station, and because it's nonprofit, we weren't making enough money. We weren't raising enough money for Chris to be able to bring home a full paycheck. So he started doing video production on the side just to make extra money. Well, the Lord blessed it so much and just took it and just blew it up. So that became our kind of like our bread and butter. And at 25, we decided to try for our first baby. So literally within 2 months, we were pregnant with our first daughter. And that was such a gift. I have so many friends now who deal with fertility issues, and I didn't understand it then, but I recognize it now. What a gift it was. It was easy for us to get pregnant. I had a completely healthy pregnancy, beautiful baby, but I decided not to go back to work because I didn't want to leave her all day long. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. And I did that for 2 years, and then we decided to try for another baby. And in the meantime, our video production has grown, our radio station has grown. Life is rosy and happy and perfect. I mean, it was wonderful. Marriage is awesome. Like, how could anybody ever get mad at their spouse? Like, of course, we had tiffs and stuff, but hearing women slander their husbands, I couldn't imagine, how could anybody do that? Well, we have our second baby, so we have 2 girls now. His saving grace was that our dog was a boy. So he had his boy in our dog. I've just told him, I'm like, listen, like, you know that the Lord has got some really special sons-in-law for you one day. You're going to be as close to those guys as you are to my dad. That's what's going to happen. It's just going to be wonderful. He's going to bless you for having little girls. And he is a great girl dad, a great girl dad. So we have our second baby, and right before we had her, a pipe burst in our house and it flooded our whole first floor. So we had to move in with my mom and dad for 8 weeks. So I'm 8 months pregnant, dealing with this pipe burst. Then we get an email from the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. You have been granted a construction permit for 92.5 FM. So we get a radio station signal. This whole time we've been a streaming station. We get a construction permit to build the tower and turn on the air. And then we have our baby. So I'm this new 28-year-old mom with a 3-year-old, a newborn baby. I've just redid my whole first floor because of the flooded pipe. My husband is turning on the radio station for the first time while he's running the video company. And I also, at that point, had taken on a leadership position in a large women's Bible study. So I'm teaching the Bible to 300 women every week. And, Satan's like, let's sprinkle on some postpartum depression on top. So I am sick with postpartum depression and anxiety. And I have never been depressed or anxious or anything. And here I am. I'm having these panic attacks on my bathroom floor. And I am like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I turn this off? Why can't I stop myself from having these panic attacks? And why can't I stop myself from being anxious all of the time and like checking on my baby 15 times a night? And I had a mentor in my life who said, you need to go to a counselor. So I go to this counselor and she says, you need therapy twice a week and you need to get on medication. Okay. You need to realize I had this stigma burned in my brain from the church that if you take medication, you're copping out. And so I'm petrified to take an antidepressant, petrified. And my counselor's like, Whitney, your brain is broken right now. You're not producing serotonin. You need this medication. So I talked to Chris about it and he's like, if she says you need it, you need it. So I get on the medication. I start going to therapy and she just starts unpacking all this stuff with me about my performance mentality and why I craved being the center of attention and how gifted God has made me, but at the same time that I was valuing myself for what I did, not who I am. And the fact that God loves me just because I'm Whitney and not because I'm Whitney, the perfect mother, the well-dressed Southern woman, the perfect daughter and daughter-in-law, the marketing guru, the social media maverick. Those are all of the gifts he's given me, but that's not why he loves me. He loves me because he created me to be in a relationship with me, to enjoy my company. And the fact that the God of the universe enjoys my company, I have a hard time even reconciling who I am. The fact that God loves that about me blows my mind. Blows my mind. So that was what happened with early motherhood and early marriage.
So we've gone through this journey, and then something else came in your life. And before we dive into this, I want you to realize, if you're listening to the podcast and you're coming from my TikTok channel and you're realizing, oh, this guy's a Jesus freak. Yes, I am. But I'm a deaf-blind Jesus freak. Let's just put it that way. The one thing I want you to remember, becoming a Christian doesn't mean it's perfect. Whitney is going to share another part of her story, and we've just heard about one part. It wasn't perfect. Pain is part of living on this earth. Our true healing is in heaven. That's why Paul says it's to die is gain. I can't wait to get to heaven and see again and hear again. But my time right here is to walk through this pain, find joy in it, persevere through it, and build the character that has hope in Christ, so that way you can see Jesus. So as long as I continue to do that, you get to experience Jesus. Pain keeps coming. So what is this next story in your life?
So the next layer, we decided to move about 2 hours south of where we live to Charleston, South Carolina, which is a large metro area in South Carolina. It is absolutely beautiful. If you've never visited Charleston, it is historic and lovely and full of wonderful people and great food and at the beach and boating, and it's just a great place to live. And this is where my husband grew up. We moved down to open a second office of our video production company because it had become so successful in Florence that we thought, okay, well, let's try and open another office in Charleston. So we moved down to Charleston. We get our second office up and running, and my dad wins this huge national award. And we all go on vacation to go celebrate his big award. And we come home from vacation, and I'm tired, like extremely tired. I think I was maybe 31 at this point. I'm 35 now. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what was wrong. So I go to my doctor, and my doctor goes, "Oh, Whitney, you're just a happy, healthy 31-year-old. You're fine. Like you're a young mom. You guys have a million things going on. Don't worry about it. You're fine. You just need some rest." And I'm like, okay. So over 3 months, I gained 30 pounds. This is insane. 30 pounds. You gain 10 pounds in a month. Okay. You haven't been exercising. You've been eating a bunch of junk and, maybe you're retaining some fluid. 30 pounds is like 2 dress sizes. It's a huge shift. And so hypothyroidism runs in my family. So I call my dad and I'm like, "Hey Dad, all of these symptoms that I'm experiencing right now, plus the weight gain, fatigue, all this crazy stuff, does this sound like hypothyroidism to you?" And he's like, "It sure does. Instead of going to your doctor again, why don't you come to my doctor, who's a holistic physician?" So this doctor is an integrative medicine, which means he performs Western medicine and Eastern medicine blended together. So he will treat you with antibiotics, but he's also going to treat you with herbs. It's the whole package. So I make an appointment with him and I go see him, and they do this huge blood panel on me, and I get the results back, and I go see him and we start to go over the results, and he's like, "Hey, so yeah, you're hypothyroid. 100% you're hypothyroid. It runs in your family. I would be shocked if you didn't have it." He said, "But you also have Lyme disease." Lyme disease? I've never been bitten by a tick before. And he's like, "Whitney, you don't have to be bitten by a tick. You can get bitten by a mosquito or a flea. in your lifetime. They all transfer Lyme. And I'm like, okay, well, what do you do for Lyme disease? And he's like, all right, buckle up because this is going to be kind of crazy. He said, we have to treat you because he said, I think you have had Lyme disease since you were in high school. He's like, you have chronic Lyme disease. He said, your body has held onto it in a latent state. It's like stayed stagnant in your body. And the stress of the past year, so I had just gone through all that postpartum depression and anxiety and childbirth and moving. And he said that stress triggered the Lyme and it flared in your system. And I'm like, okay, what do we do? And he said, we're going to have to treat you with antibiotics hard for 2 years. Oh. And he's like, I really don't want to have to tell you this, but you're going to have to go part-time with work because you're going to be so tired. The die-off of the virus in your system is going to be so bad that you are going to have to sleep every afternoon. You're going to have to change your diet. You're going to have to take 30 plus pills a day. You're going to have to take your antibiotics, but you're also going to have to take all these supplements to get your body healthy enough. And I'm like, okay, if you say so, we have to do this. And so I had to call all my clients and tell my clients that I was going part-time. So I was handling the marketing side of our video company and doing marketing for Christian authors and speakers. I'm working with these women and I have to call them and tell them that I've got to go part-time. And one by one, they start firing us because they're like, Whitney's my girl. I don't want to work with anybody else. And if she can't work, then I don't want to work with you guys. So they start firing us. We're losing clients. We're losing money. And I start taking this treatment. And he was not joking. As this stuff dies off in your system, it toxifies your system. And so you have to detox from the Lyme die-off. And they're called spirochetes. They are these little corkscrew-shaped bacteria. And as they die off, you have to flush it from your body. And I did that for 2 years. 2 years. I'm telling you, I could not take a shower without having to go lay down after I took a shower. That's how tired I was. I couldn't exercise. I looked swollen. It was low. It was a low season, especially being an entrepreneur. We were running our own companies. We lost half of our revenue in a 3-month time frame because all these people fired us because I had to scale back work. It was crazy. And we have these 2 little girls. And I have to be a mom. So my performance mentality, you know me, I'm like high achieving, high performance. Here I am having to take naps in the afternoon. I felt wretched. It was awful.
So then how did God come to your rescue?
Well, first off, he came to my rescue because he crafted the diagnosis. He brought me to the right person so that they could find out what was wrong with me. I'm deep in my relationship with the Lord at this point where, I'm talking to the Lord all day long. So he's constantly comforting me. But he starts giving me these ideas as I'm resting and recovering. And that took a large part of my time. But as I'm spending this time, he's like, hey, remember when I made you a Bible teacher when you were 25? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, so all the stuff you've been doing for all these other women in ministry, social media management and getting their online courses up and running and giving them all this vision for their future of their ministry. And why can't you do that? And I'm like, Lord, you want me to teach the Bible on the internet? And he's like, yeah, I do. So actually, the Lord, he doesn't sound like that to me. He doesn't sound like, yeah, I do. He was like, yes, you're going to be. Here's the idea. I want you to start a YouTube channel. I see this opportunity where there's very few, at this point, women teaching the word on YouTube for other women. And I feel like 100% imposter syndrome. Somebody's going to call me and tell me that I didn't get permission to start this channel. And the only reason I'm doing it is because I have a video production company and I've got the resources. Somebody's going to call me and be like, you didn't go to seminary. You don't know enough. I'm like panicked over what people are going to say in the comments. I'm like freaking out. So I launched my first video and it's how to have a quiet time. I was so nervous filming this video that I literally had red hives all the way up my neck. You can see it on the video. I've got these hives. I'm wearing this huge scarf to try to cover it up because I was so nervous. Like, you have to realize I don't get nervous on stage, but doing this YouTube channel, I was so scared. Trying these other videos, let me do some makeup videos or do some fashion videos, thinking that I could be one of those types of YouTubers. I did some vlogs, like day in the life vlogs. My audience wanted Bible content. They wanted me to teach the Bible. They didn't want to watch vlog videos. They didn't want to watch makeup videos. They wanted Bible content. And so that's what I started to create. And all of a sudden it started to take off. And I've got 500 subscribers, and I've got 1,000 subscribers, and then I've got 10,000 subscribers. And I'm like, what is going on here? So we start throwing more resources at it as a company. We start filming more, and I'm starting to get more confident in it. And I'm like, okay, why don't I start praying for people on YouTube? So I start these prayers, and I write these prayers in my quiet time. So they're very saturated in the Holy Spirit, because I'm saturated in the Holy Spirit during my quiet time. My channel is about to hit 60,000 subscribers, which is really, really exciting. Really exciting.
That's so cool. That was the second video I saw.
Yeah.
With Pray for Your Son. I sent that to my wife because we have foster son. And if you're listening to this podcast, be in prayer for us, because we are in deep warfare right now in our home. I love that Pray for Your Son, even though you don't have sons.
So I have to tell your audience how I came up with that prayer. I told you this when we talked on the phone for the first time. I'm a girl mom. So to pray for sons for me, I would really have to stretch into an arena that I don't live in, which is boy world, which is very different than girl world. Girls talk a lot. Boys jump off the walls. That's just the difference. But I have a bunch of friends who are really amazing boy moms. So I got on Facebook and I said, hey, boy moms, I'm looking for prayers that you actually pray over your sons. If you don't mind, leave those prayers in the comments below and let me know what those prayers are. Well, I'm thinking I might get like 5 or 10 responses. I end up getting like 75 or 80 responses from these moms, newborn moms, all the way to like women in their 80s are sharing these prayers for their grown sons and their grandsons. It was incredible. So I just took all those prayers and then compiled them into one long prayer. It is really, really powerful, especially over the legacy of these boys' lives. That was the part of that prayer that was the strongest for me, was that these moms wanted to pray for their legacy. And that was just amazing.
As I discovered your channel, I was basically looking for testimonies, because the Perseverance podcast is all about testimonies. And it's about people's stories that have persevered. And your story is exactly that.
You can find me at whitneymeade.com. That's kind of my headquarters. That's where everything lives. You can also find my YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/Whitney Meade, and that's Meade. You can also find me on Instagram. So my Instagram channel basically is pretty much dedicated to blowing the lid off of the election and COVID and that kind of thing. So if you find me on Instagram, you're going to have a lot of political content on there. That's another one of my passions. Politics is next on the list for me of where I'm going with my life. And I also have a podcast called the Meade Feed, and that's on Spotify and Apple. You can find me in those places.
One of the things that I really took away from your story is God never forgot you. And look where you're at today. Look where God is allowing your light to be shine. Life isn't easy, but I always love to say, it's challenges that make us overcome. And those challenges make us stronger and allows us to take the next challenge. So Whitney, thank you so much for being a part of the Perseverance podcast. And I'm excited to see how your piece is going to be molded.
I can't wait. Thank you so much.
Here comes the Perseverance Corner. So today, I'm going to read the passage of the lost son. And I think, given Whitney's story, this really hits home to what her parents did when she went astray and they were there to lift her up. Jesus continued, there was a man that had 2 sons. The youngest son said to his father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. So not long after that, he got everything together that he had and set off to a long distance country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields and to feed the pigs. He longed to fill his stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired servants have food to spare, and here I am starving to death. I will set out and go back to my father's and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants. So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son and threw his arms around him and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. But said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it, and let's have a feast and celebrate, for this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found. So we're coming to an end to the Perseverance podcast. Just a couple updates. I know we did announcements earlier, but just wanted those that have been following with the See Me cane and the update with the lighted blind cane, I want to make sure I add this to here, so that way you're aware if you want to participate and support. So currently right now, the See Me cane is getting ready to start some negotiations. So we're looking at a couple companies to start doing the assembly. We pretty much have solved most of our LEDs and our lighting issues that we've been dealing with, and we're getting ready to start the testing. So I'm super excited what that all is going to look like. We're going to get more information over the next couple months, kind of what this testing looks like. So if you are somebody that wants to test, you need to let me know. You can email me at Kelvin@Perseverance Podcast or info@Perseverance Podcast. Either one works. And let me know you are interested, and that's how we'll work that out. So also, some really cool, exciting stuff. And I'm only adding it to the end of this podcast because most people won't listen to the end of the podcast, is my current foster son that we have. We are getting closer and closer to be able to adopt him. And so at the end of this year, we're going to be doing several amazing stories of how my foster son Zebedee has overcome so many challenges. And I'm excited just to share those journeys with you guys and allow you to see how when he came to our home, he was lost, in pain, and in hurt. And with love of my wife and I, we've been able to uplift him, encourage him, help him live beyond his challenges, and allow him to become the man of God that he called him to be. So I'm excited. And so continue to stay alert there and see how this beautiful is going to come to fruition and when we officially celebrate our gotcha day with him. So you guys have a good one. And like I always say, go live beyond your challenges. And I'll see you next month. Now you ready to persevere for your challenges today. Thank you for joining me on the Perseverance Podcast. If you'd like to get a hold of me, you can email me at Kelvin@perseverancepodcast.com. You can also follow me on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Deafblind Potter. If you like to buy some merch or some Deafblind Potter pieces, you can go to deafblindpotter.com. Please give us a 5-star rating and subscribe to the Persevering Podcast so you don't miss an episode. That way, you and I can continue living beyond our challenges and persevering through them too.